too depraved for their mother to remember, the Ozark Triplets, Eli, Noah, and Sam. The very words send shivers down the spine of anyone familiar with the isolated communities nestled within the rugged Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri. This is not merely a tale of family tragedy, but a harrowing chronicle of generations of isolation that culminated in one of the most disturbing cases of inbreeding ever documented in modern American history. The year was 1973 when local authorities first became aware of the Keller family living in an isolated homestead deep within Shannon County, Missouri. Hidden among the dense forests and rolling hills of the Ozarks, the Keller clan had remained virtually untouched by outside influence for over a century. Their story begins not with the triplets themselves, but with their ancestors who settled in this remote region following the Civil War. The Kellers were descendants of German immigrants who arrived in America seeking religious freedom and land to call their own. By 1870, the patriarch Joseph Keller had established a homestead far from civilization, deliberately choosing isolation over integration. As the decades passed, the family grew increasingly reclusive, maintaining minimal contact with nearby communities and developing a deep distrust of outsiders. By the 1940s, the Kellers had intermarried with two other local families, the Schmidts and the Muellers, creating a closed genetic pool that would eventually lead to devastating consequences. Medical records from a rare visit by a traveling doctor in 1952 noted that several Keller children displayed unusual facial features and delayed developmental milestones, early indicators of the genetic complications that would later become more pronounced. The parents of the infamous triplets, Martha and Isaiah Keller, were first cousins whose own parents were second cousins. This compounding of consanguineous relationships created a genetic powder keg. Martha gave birth to the triplets on October 17, 1954, in the family's cabin without medical assistance. According to local lore, the midwife who was summoned 3 days later was so disturbed by what she witnessed that she broke the family's code of silence and reported her concerns to the county health department. The report was largely ignored until 1973 when a forest ranger stumbled upon the Keller property while tracking a missing hiker. What he discovered would shock the conscience of the nation and expose a hidden world of isolation and genetic tragedy. The triplets, Eli, Noah, and Sam, were 19 years old when they were finally discovered by authorities. Their physical appearance revealed the devastating effects of generations of inbreeding. Each young man exhibited distinct facial asymmetry, with pronounced brow ridges and recessed chins. Their eyes were set unusually far apart, and their limbs displayed noticeable disproportions. But it was their cognitive development that proved most tragic. The brothers communicated through a primitive language of their own creation, unintelligible to outsiders. Initial assessments revealed severely limited cognitive abilities, though each brother demonstrated unique capacities. Eli showed remarkable mechanical intuition despite being unable to read or write. Noah possessed an extraordinary memory for natural patterns and weather cycles. Sam, the most severely affected, could barely communicate but displayed an uncanny ability to locate water sources and wild edibles. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. These forgotten American stories expose the dark underbelly of our rural past that history books deliberately omit. Subscribe now to uncover the hidden truths your ancestors never wanted you to know. The Keller property itself told a story of generational isolation. The main house, a sprawling structure built over decades, featured additions and modifications that reflected the growing family's needs, but also their increasing detachment from modern society. The building lacked electricity and running water, despite being constructed well into the 20th century. Scattered across the 120-acre property were smaller cabins, workshops, and storage buildings, creating a self-contained community designed to minimize contact with the outside world. When authorities entered the main house, they discovered journals dating back to 1875, meticulously documenting the family's history, beliefs, and daily life. These records revealed a disturbing ideology that had evolved over generations, justifying the practice of consanguineous marriages as a means of preserving what they called the pure bloodline. The journals contained elaborate genealogical trees tracking familial relationships and noting physical and mental traits deemed desirable or undesirable. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, a genetic counselor who later studied the case extensively, described the Keller family's practices as a tragic real-world experiment in genetic isolation. Her 1975 paper on the case noted the Keller genealogy represents one of the most comprehensive documented cases of sustained inbreeding in modern American history, providing valuable insights into the accumulation of recessive genetic disorders over multiple generations. The most disturbing discovery came from Martha Keller's personal journals. As the triplets' mother, her writings revealed a woman increasingly aware of the consequences of her family's practices, yet unable to break free from generations of indoctrination. In entries dated shortly after the triplets' birth, she described them as marked by God and expressed confusion about their developmental challenges. By the time the boys were 10, her entries became more disturbed, often referring to them as the punishment for our ways and mirrors reflecting our sins. Perhaps most heartbreaking was an entry from 1970, just 3 years before the family was discovered, where Martha wrote, "I can no longer remember a time before this life. I look at my sons and cannot recognize their faces as human. What have we become? What have we created? I pray for forgiveness, but no voice answers from the darkness." The triplets' father, Isaiah Keller, presented a different perspective. When interviewed by authorities, he defended the family's isolation and practices with religious fervor. "The outside world is corrupt," he stated repeatedly during questioning. "We keep to our own because God commanded it." Isaiah's own physical appearance showed signs of genetic disorders, including polydactyly, extra fingers, and a severe overbite that affected his speech. Dr. James Thornton, a psychiatrist who evaluated Isaiah in 1974, described him as a man living in an alternate reality constructed over generations of isolation. His report concluded that Isaiah genuinely believed the family's practices were divinely sanctioned, and that the outside world represented spiritual and physical contamination. The wider Keller clan, numbering nearly 40 individuals spread across the property and nearby homesteads, displayed varying degrees of physical and cognitive impairments. Medical examinations revealed a high incidence of recessive genetic disorders, including phenylketonuria, Tay-Sachs disease, and cystic fibrosis, conditions rarely seen clustered in a single family but devastatingly common in closed genetic populations. The discovery of the Keller family sparked immediate debate among local authorities about how to proceed. Social services advocated for removal of the minor children, while medical professionals pushed for comprehensive evaluation and treatment. Legal experts questioned whether adults with impaired cognitive abilities could be removed from their homes against their will, even if those homes were sites of ongoing genetic harm. The triplets themselves became the center of this swirling controversy. When separated from the family compound for medical evaluation, they exhibited extreme distress, unable to comprehend the sudden change in environment. Dr. Meredith Wilson, who supervised their initial medical assessment, noted, "These young men exist in a world entirely constructed from their isolated experience. The introduction to modern society is not merely confusing, it appears actively traumatic for them." Eli, the most physically robust of the three, responded to the separation with aggression and attempts to escape. His medical records indicate that he injured 2 orderlies during his first week at Missouri State Hospital, not out of malice but from profound fear and disorientation. Noah retreated into near catatonic states, refusing food and maintaining a rigid posture for hours. Sam, already the most impaired, engaged in self-injurious behaviors that required constant supervision. The genetic testing available in the early 1970s was primitive by today's standards, but it confirmed what clinicians suspected. The triplets shared multiple recessive genetic conditions, including Fragile X syndrome and a rare form of hereditary ataxia that affected their motor control and coordination. Their unique status as triplets born from an already compromised genetic lineage made them subjects of intense scientific interest, though ethical concerns limited the extent of research conducted. Perhaps most poignant was the discovery that each brother possessed unexpected islands of ability amid their broader impairments. What would today be recognized as savant-like qualities? Eli could disassemble and reassemble complex mechanical objects without training. Noah could predict weather changes hours before they occurred, sensing barometric shifts imperceptible to others. Sam, though nearly nonverbal, could navigate the densely wooded Ozark forest with uncanny precision, never losing his way even in unfamiliar terrain. These abilities had been integrated into the family's survival strategies, with each brother assigned tasks that leveraged their unique capacities. The family journals revealed that this practice had been consistent across generations, with individuals who displayed particular talents regardless of other impairments, given specific roles within the community. If you're watching this story and feeling a cold chill run down your spine, type "God forgive them" in the comments. The Keller family believed divine judgment would come to those who learned of their ways but remained silent. Break the chain of silence that protected these practices for generations. The legal proceedings that followed the discovery of the Keller family lasted nearly 2 years. The case presented unprecedented challenges to the Missouri legal system, which struggled to balance individual rights with protection from harm. The court-appointed guardian for the triplets, attorney Rebecca Lawson, argued passionately that they required specialized care that the isolated community could not provide. "These young men have been denied the opportunity to develop their full potential," she stated in court documents. "Their isolation has been a prison, not a protection." The counter-argument came from unexpected sources. Several anthropologists and cultural relativists cautioned against imposing majority cultural norms on a community that had functioned independently for generations. They argued that forcible integration could cause psychological harm that outweighed the potential benefits of medical intervention. This debate extended beyond the triplets to the entire Keller clan, particularly the children. By 1975, the court had ordered the removal of all minors under 16 from the compound, placing them in foster care while maintaining family visitation rights. The adults, including the triplets, were given the option to remain on the property with regular medical supervision or to transition to supported living facilities. The triplet story took diverging paths following these decisions. Eli, who had shown the most hostility toward outside intervention, chose to remain on the family property but engaged with vocational rehabilitation services. By 1980, he had developed sufficient skills as a mechanic to establish a small repair shop that served neighboring communities, marking the first voluntary commercial interaction between the Kellers and outsiders in decades. Noah's weather sensitivity led to a collaboration with the local agricultural extension office, where his predictions helped area farmers prepare for changing conditions. This role gradually expanded his social circle and exposure to the wider world, though he continued to live on the family property and required support for many daily activities. Sam, whose impairments were most severe, transitioned to a specialized care facility in 1976 after suffering a series of seizures that the family could not manage. His separation from the property and his brothers caused significant distress initially, but records indicate he eventually adapted to his new environment and formed attachments to several caregivers. The scientific impact of the Keller case extended far beyond the immediate family. The discovery prompted a comprehensive survey of isolated communities throughout the Ozarks and Appalachian regions, revealing dozens of similar, though less extreme, situations. These findings led to the establishment of the Rural Health Outreach Program in 1977, which sought to provide medical services and genetic counseling to remote communities without disrupting their way of life. Dr. Hayes, whose initial study of the Kellers had brought attention to their plight, became the program's first director. "We must approach these communities with respect and humility," she wrote in the program's founding documents. "Our goal is to offer information and services, not to judge or dismantle generations of tradition." The Keller case taught us that intervention without understanding can cause as much harm as good. The genetic legacy of the Keller family provided valuable data for researchers studying the effects of consanguinity on human development. The family's detailed genealogical records spanning over a century offered unprecedented insight into how recessive genetic disorders accumulate and express over multiple generations of intermarriage. A 1982 study published in the Journal of Human Genetics used anonymized data from the Keller lineage to identify previously unknown genetic markers associated with developmental disorders. This research contributed to early screening protocols that would later become standard practice in genetic counseling. The ethical implications of using data derived from such circumstances sparked debate within the scientific community about consent, dignity, and the rights of vulnerable populations. Martha Keller, the triplets' mother, became an unexpected advocate for change within her community following the legal interventions, though initially resistant to outside involvement. Her journals from 1976 onward show a woman grappling with her family's history and its consequences. "I look at my sons and see both our failure and our redemption," she wrote. "Through them we are learning to see beyond our boundaries." By 1980, Martha had established a small school on the family property, inviting children from neighboring homesteads to receive basic education alongside the remaining Keller children. This represented a radical departure from the isolationist practices that had defined the family for generations. Isaiah initially opposed these changes, but gradually relented as he witnessed the benefits of limited engagement with the outside world. The wider community's response to the Keller family evolved over time, from shock and revulsion to a more nuanced understanding. Local newspapers, which had initially sensationalized the story with headlines like "Mountain Monsters Discovered in Ozark's Shannon County Gazette, August 1973, shifted to more compassionate coverage as the family's history came to light. A documentary filmed in 1979 titled "The Forgotten Ones: Isolation in the Ozarks" presented the Kellers and similar families as products of historical circumstances rather than objects of curiosity or derision. The film won several awards for its sensitive portrayal of rural isolation and sparked public discourse about the invisible communities existing at the margins of American society. Religious leaders in the region, who had initially condemned the family's practices as immoral, gradually engaged with the Kellers in attempts at reconciliation and support. Reverend Thomas Blackwood of the First Baptist Church of Eminence established regular visits to the property, offering spiritual guidance that acknowledged the family's religious convictions while gently challenging their interpretations. "These are not evil people," Reverend Blackwood stated in a 1981 interview. "They are people who followed a path into darkness, one small step at a time, each generation moving a little further from the light without recognizing the growing shadows. Our role is not to judge but to help them find their way back." The state's approach to the Keller case established precedents that would influence policies regarding isolated communities throughout the country. Rather than forcing immediate integration, authorities developed a graduated intervention model that prioritized health and safety while respecting cultural autonomy. This approach recognized that generations of isolation could not and perhaps should not be undone overnight. By the mid-1980s, the Keller property had transformed from a secluded compound into a small but viable community engaged with the wider world on its own terms. The introduction of electricity, telephone service, and regular medical visits dramatically improved living conditions while preserving aspects of the family's traditional lifestyle. The triplets, now in their early 30s, continued their distinct life paths. Eli's mechanical business expanded to include small engine repair and basic automotive services, providing both income and social connections. His marriage in 1985 to Sarah Jenkins, a woman from a neighboring community, marked a decisive break from the family's history of consanguinity. Their first child, born in 1987, showed no signs of the genetic disorders that had affected previous generations. Noah's weather predictions gained regional fame, and by 1986, he was consulting regularly with the National Weather Service, which found his intuitive forecasting complemented their technical methods. especially in predicting sudden storm systems common to the Ozark region. Though he never developed full literacy, Noah dictated weather journals that meteorologists found valuable for understanding microclimate patterns in the area. Sam, whose health had remained fragile, passed away in 1983 at the age of 29 from complications related to his neurological conditions. His death affected the family deeply, but also strengthened their commitment to the changes they had begun. The Sam Keller Memorial Clinic, established on the property in 1985 with state funding, provided basic healthcare services to remote communities throughout Shannon County, turning a personal tragedy into a communal resource. The genetic legacy of the Keller family continued to yield scientific insights as technology advanced. In 1989, researchers using newly developed DNA sequencing techniques identified a previously unknown genetic mutation specific to the Keller lineage that affected neurological development. This discovery contributed to broader understanding of how isolated genetic pools develop unique characteristics over time. Dr. Hayes, in her final paper on the family published in 1990, reflected on the 17 years since their discovery. The Keller case represents both a tragedy of isolation and a triumph of human resilience. These individuals, born into circumstances not of their making, have demonstrated remarkable capacity for adaptation and growth when given appropriate support and respect. Perhaps the most significant legacy of the triplet story was its impact on public health approaches to isolated communities throughout rural America. The graduated intervention model developed for the Kellers became a template for similar situations, emphasizing education and support over forced integration or condemnation. By the early 1990s, the original Keller property had evolved into a small settlement of mixed families. Some descended from the original clan and others who had joined the community through marriage or association. The strict isolation that had characterized previous generations was replaced by selective engagement with the outside world, allowing community members to benefit from modern medicine and education while maintaining aspects of their traditional lifestyle. Martha Keller, who passed away in 1992, left a final journal entry that perhaps best summarizes the family's journey. Our story began in fear of the outside, fear of difference, fear of change. That fear turned inward over generations until we could no longer recognize ourselves in our children. The breaking of our isolation was painful but necessary, like setting a bone that is healed wrong. Now, watching Eli's children grow strong and straight, I understand that true preservation comes not from turning away from the world, but from finding our place within it. The story of the Ozark Triplets remains a powerful reminder of how isolation, fear, and misguided traditions can lead to profound human suffering. Yet it also demonstrates the remarkable capacity for change and healing when intervention is approached with compassion, respect, and patience. If you've watched this far, it's because you're drawn to these hidden American histories that reveal the complex truth of our rural past. Leave a comment saying I watched until the end, so I can get to know you and understand who truly appreciates the stories on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe for more untold American histories like this video to support our research, and share it with others who appreciate discovering the shadowed corners of our collective past. The legacy of Eli, Noah, and Sam Keller lives on not only in the scientific advancements their case enabled, but in the transformed community that bears their name, and in the policies that now protect other vulnerable populations from similar fates. Their story, once too depraved for their mother to acknowledge, has become a testament to human adaptability and the possibility of redemption, even in the darkest of circumstances.